Well, good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the painting studio. I have to apologize. I've got a little bit of a head cold, so if I sound funny, that's why. This will be session 2 of creating a white-breasted nuthatch miniature Christmas tree ornament. And in session 1, we got the bird carved. In this session, we'll get the bird painted. And I've pulled up some reference photos from my bird feeder that'll give us the direction on feather patterns and color. And I've also got a picture here of the underside of the bird that I found online. It's very helpful, this rusty red patch under the rump there. But we'll get the bird painted, and this will be the final session of creating miniature Christmas tree carvings. It's been a fun diversion from the full-size waterfowl carvings that I've been doing, that I primarily do. And I've had a lot of fun learning about the birds. If you're enjoying my channel and getting value out of it, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I do appreciate that. It helps me out. It's free, and I'll keep it that way. I want to continue to build resources for people that might want to carve wildfowl, be it decoys or this type of even miniature carvings for the Christmas tree. Let's have some fun with this little bird. All right, I've already textured the bird, and I demonstrated that in the previous 2 sessions. So if you want to see how to do that, you can check those out. The black-capped chickadee and the red-breasted nuthatch miniatures. But basically, I use a combination of Liquitex burnt umber, heavy body acrylic, 50% Liquitex gesso, create this type of a brownish gray, and then sponge that material on the bird just to give it a slight texture, very fine texture, smooth beak. And so I won't duplicate that here, but as I said, if you want to see it, you can take a look at those other demonstrations. We'll just take a quick look at our reference pictures. The beak looks like it's very dark, but similar to the red-breasted nuthatch, is light underneath and kind of fades out to dark at the tip. So we're going to want to do that. The majority of the bird's head and belly back to the rump are white, and then it's got this very dark black cap that kind of curls and comes back down to the cape here. We've got this slate blue-gray color and very long tertials, very long primaries that almost reach the tip of the tail back here. And then a dark section here, dark feathers here, dark feathers here. So it's going to be very interesting. A lot of gray values, black and white on this bird. This is a good view of that I pulled out of the feathers of the back here. And you can see on this particular bird, they're black on the inside, 2 feathers here, and the third feather is a little black there, but primarily black out here, gray with a white edge. So quite a bit going on. Another thing to notice, the primary feathers have a pretty large white tip on them. The tail is has that gray center and then some black and white, very similar to the red-breasted nuthatch that we did. These feathers on the side are going to be black highlighted and then edged with light. And just one more note on this underside. This gives you a good view of the tail feathers, and you can see the rump goes quite a ways back on the tail feathers. You've got these black edging with some white tips, kind of geometric shapes there, and then this rusty red that actually comes up and underneath the side pockets on both sides, and then some white feathering mixed in. So from the side, these white feathers really show up along the edge of the tail. Okay, let's take a look at the paint. I used my chalk pencil to pencil in this black cap. Comes up over the eye on both sides, and then this pulls down against the cape here. So we'll do white. This will be the gray up here, and then I did chalk in kind of where the white feathers come back under the tail. For the white, I'm using off-white mix of white gesso with raw umber mixed in, just a slight amount of raw umber to take it down, the brightness down a bit. I'm just going to use a little angled brush and build up the color slowly. And on these edges, I'm going to make sure the paint is very thin so I don't have a paint line that I have to try to disguise later between the black and the white. I'm painting right over the eyes because we can easily remove that later with an X-Acto knife and not worry about scratching the eyes with the blade. So I'm going to paint under the primaries here. I'm going to keep the white kind of up on the edge here and then dive under the tail back here. And it looks like there's a couple major feathers back here with a little separation in the middle. So I'll go through this probably 2, maybe 3 times in drying between coats until I get a nice solid color built up in the white sections of the bird, and then I'll come back. For this slate blue gray color, I've got Nimbus gray mixed with a little Payne's gray, which tends to be on the blue side, then some raw umber and a touch of carbon black so it doesn't get too blue. And I'm going to paint that on this section clear back to the, I'm going to go ahead and paint the primaries and the tail this bluish gray color. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife, kind of go around the perimeter of the eye and then remove that white paint. So we can see the eye as we continue. Now I'm going to paint the cap carbon black with a little detail brush. And we'll come back and add some feather barbs for detail. But first I just want to block in the general shape of this cap. That goes right into the beak. And as long as I'm here with the detail brush, I'm just going to pull in some feather barbs across that junction to the cape to break that up a bit and soften it. So I'll get that painted and then come back. Again, while I have black in the detail brush, I'm just adding some feather barbs along the margin here between the black and the off-white, just to break this up and indicate some feather structure there. And I'll go back with the off-white in the opposite direction as well to kind of clean this up and further refine those feather barbs. It's very tiny, meticulous work. For the beak, I'm using carbon black with a little of this value added to make it a little more gray and not just jet black. And I'm using the detail brush, and right now I'm going to paint the entire beak that color, including down below, and then we'll come back and add the light highlights. But I want a little bit of a bluish value in this beak. And for the primaries, I added burnt umber to this, a little bit of this blue-gray color. And I'm going to block in the primary groups with that kind of a brownish tone, but still maintains a little bit of the bluish color. And I'm just using a detail brush to get in here and block in the primaries. Painted the underside of the tail here smoked pearl. Those look like they're white feathers, but I just wanted a slightly darker value than the off-white to work with those tail feathers and distinguish between the feathers of the rump here and the tail. All right, I'm using a little scrubber and some carbon black, and I want to darken the edge of the tail feathers here, just the outer edge, and kind of then blend that into the blue gray as it goes towards the center. And I'm using the scrub brush and the texture there to just kind of fade that into the blue. And then I'll rinse that out. Go back to my original blue-gray color. Make sure I'm in camera and kind of blend in the opposite direction to soften that. About like that. And then I'm using a little off-white and making that outer edge off-white. White feather shows up next to the black here. I'll spend some time trying to soften that up a bit. Now I'm using Nimbus Gray on a detail brush and just pulling in a few tail feathers. I use some off-white on the detail brush just to lighten the tips of those. And then I'm going to go back with the Nimbus Gray and pull a quill into the center of that feather. I'm using Nimbus Gray to outline the primary feathers. Pretty delicate work at this scale. Now I'm using off-white to put these larger tips, light tips on the ends of the feathers. And on the reference, I have the inboard side or half of these feathers is black. These two feathers and I'm just kind of putting some feather barbs into the cape there. On both sides I'll do that. And then this larger feather on the bird I'm looking at, it's dark on this side of the feather, but not all the way to the tip. So back into here, there's some dark. So I'm going to start with the carbon black back here, but it fades out as it gets closer to the tip of the feather. Kind of like that. Then these feathers are dark inside and fade out to gray. So I'm going to paint carbon black on each one of these. Like that. Then I'm using Nimbus Gray to outline the edge of each of these. And let that fade out as you go towards the cape. And by fade out, I mean lift up on the brush so the line becomes very narrow. put a little burnt umber in the original base body color mix, and I'm darkening some of these lower tertials just a bit. I'm going to leave these light up here, at least in the reference pictures that I have. That's what I'm seeing. Then I've combined carbon black with burnt umber, and I'm going to paint in this little group of feathers. Including a couple of feathers up here that are also very dark. I'm using Nimbus Gray and outlined those couple of feathers, and then I'm going to use that to outline these 3 or 4 feathers in a small group. I used carbon black to darken just a few of those lower feathers, and now I'm going to use Nimbus Gray and outline, just lighten the edge of each of these. This will take some time and patience. And if I go a little bit too strong with the light value, I can come back with the dark in the opposite direction. So I'll get those painted. Now I've got the off-white, and I'm just going to go in and highlight the edges of each of these feathers. So this back part becomes more of a light bar across there. And I'll do the same thing back here. Same thing on the tips of these larger feathers. Now I'm taking the base body color, darkened a bit with carbon black, and just pulling a few feather flow lines through here. Just to break this up and make it look more like groups of feathers, kind of interlocking, overlapping lines. used off-white and just put a few feather barbs crossing over into this slate blue-gray area from the breast. Now I've got some white gesso. I'm just going to use that to begin to define some feathers back here in the tail rump area. And wrap those around the side here. So I'll do that about to this point so we can get some of that rust orange feathering in this area. Then I'm going to use the bright white gesso to put some flow lines through these white areas and some tick marks to indicate feathering here. And create a little depth to this white area. So it's just not one solid color. Hopefully you can see that in the video. It gives it a little life. I'm going to do that throughout the head and breast area. And then when I get back to these feathers, just kind of pull it into that area. I'll come back and show you that. It's just a quick look at those flow lines. And then I kind of tied them into those feathers in the back. Now I've got a little burnt sienna with raw sienna and a little bit of smoked pearl to give us this rusty color. And I'm just using a little scrubber to begin to put some color at the base of those and fade out to lighter at the feather tips. And we want some of that to show from the side. And I'm leaving these feathers light white. There's just an area in the back here that then kind of fades out as we go forward. So I'm going to hit a few spots and then let that fade into the white. And then we'll come back and do a little bit more blending with the white edges. Just to put that indication of rust underneath, like in that photo. I've got those softened up a bit. I'm going back with the bright white and just kind of redefining the edges of these feathers. Just to kind of clean things up a bit. And break up those feather edges. So I'll work that for a while. For the tail feathers underneath, only a few feathers that really show up under there because they're overlapping quite a bit. So I'm using the bright white gesso just to outline a few of those. And these are tipped in black, carbon black, kind of in a shape like this. Using a little raw umber to put some feather quills in place there. A few splits in these feathers. There's a great shot of the underside of the beak. You can see how light that lower mandible is. I've got some smoked pearl, a little scrub brush. I'm going to focus on the lower mandible here and then fade that out to the dark at the tip. Then I'm going to go back with off-white and lighten that even further near the face. Almost matches the feather coloring in that area. This will take some time. I always say that, but it does. It takes time to develop a nice soft blend. I'm using the off-white here. Okay, that's getting close. And then I'll probably come back with the black and do a little blending back in the other direction as I lighten this up a little bit. I'll keep working on that and then come back. Now I've got a little Nimbus gray with carbon black, and I'm just going to pull a few splits into the tail feathers, also the large feathers back here. So I'll just go through all of these and just put a split here and there. Break things up a bit. Same over here. Just a quick look at the completed bird. A cute little guy. Just a quick look at the underside there as well. Gotta patch the hole and repaint that and be finished up. Just a quick look at all three birds together. Okay, that's a wrap on the white-breasted nuthatch project. I'm happy with the way he turned out. I hope it's been helpful. It's been fun for me. Until next time, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to you.